Good morning, Grammar 4. Let's get ready to do our final lesson for the week, Lesson 109, Equivalent Fractions. By now, you should have done your facts practice, which is 100 subtraction facts, and you should have done your mental math and the problem solving question for today. So let's go ahead and jump into the new concept where we're talking about forming fractions that are equivalent. Equivalent meaning equal to. So as you know, with a fraction, you can have the same quantity with a different numerator and a different denominator. And if you look at our example right here, here we have different fractions that all represent the same quantity. We have 1/2, which is 1 out of 2 spaces. Here we have 2/4, or 2 shaded out of 4 available. 3/6, which is 3 spaces shaded out of 6 available. 4/8, and 5/10. A couple lessons ago, we talked about how you can quickly find out if a fraction is half if you look at your denominator, and if your denominator is, or if your numerator is half of your denominator, then you know that this fraction is equal to 1/2. So back to the big idea here is that we have different fractions that name the same amount, and they're called equivalent fractions. So let's take a look at example 1. Example 1 says that here we have 2/3 shaded in, 2 shaded in out of 3 equal parts. So how do we find out 2/3 of the figure shaded here? Well, we know that this represents 1/3, this space represents another 1/3, and this represents another 1/3. So if we want to make it equivalent to 2/3, then we're going to fill in this rectangle, these 2 rectangles, and these 2 rectangles, so that we have 4 out of the 6 parts to be shaded. So now we have to determine, are 2/3 and 4/6 equivalent fractions? And they are, because in order to go from 2 to 4, we multiply by 2. In order to go from 3 to 6, we multiply by 2 again. And that comes into our next big idea. We'll come back to example 2 in a second. That we can use fractions to using 1 to find a common or an equivalent fraction. So let's take an example here, 1/2. If we wanted to multiply by 2 halves to get another equivalent fraction to 1/2, we could do that. So there's a bunch of different ways to say 1 in math. Really, any number over or divided by itself is equal to 1. So if I wanted to multiply a fraction by, I don't know, let's start with 1/2. Say I wanted to multiply by 6/6. Well, we know that 6/6 is equal to 1, so we're not changing the quantity. 1 times 6 is 6, 2 times 6 is 12. Now we ask ourselves, is 6, the numerator, half of 12? And it is. So 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2. It just means that there's going to be a lot more pieces of the pie. If we were sitting at a dinner table and we had a pie with we had 2 pieces and 12 pieces, who do you think is going to get a bigger portion? Well, if you were to have 1 of the 2 pieces and you were to have 6 of the 12 pieces, you would be having an equivalent amount of pieces. But these pieces are going to be tinier because they're 12ths. All right, let's try it again. Let's say 1/2 times, let's say 10. So we're going to go 10/10. We know that any number divided by itself is 1. So 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 10 is 20. Is our numerator half of our denominator? Yes. 1/2 is equivalent to 10/20ths. All right, let's come on back over here. Let's do example 2. What equivalent fractions are shown at the right? Well, here we have 8 pieces, 2 of which are shaded in. So 2/8. Here we have 4 pieces, 1 of which is shaded in. Is 2/8 the same quantity as 1/4? Well, if we look at our fractions right here and we say 2/8 and 1/4, are they equivalent? Well, in order to go from 2 to 1, I literally just divided in half, and I got 1. Did I do that to my denominator as well? 8 divided by 2, that's supposed to be a 2. Does it equal 4? Yes. So 2/8 and 1/4 are equivalent. All right, let's go on down to example 3. It says find 4 fractions equal to 1/3 by multiplying 1/3 by 2 halves, 3/3, 4/4, and 5/5. So we're going to take 1/3, we're going to multiply it by each of these fractions, and we're going to see, does our outcome or our product equal 1/3. So 1/3 times 2/2 is 2/6. Well, is 1/3 and 2/6 equivalent? Yes. And I'll show it here. So we have, 1/3 and 2/6. When you multiply by a fraction with the same numerator and denominator, you're multiplying by 1, which means you're not changing the outcome. So that's 1. So 1/3 and 2/6 are equivalent. In fact, each of our answers in the fraction are equivalent to 1/3. So guys, go ahead and do your lesson practice down here, and then make sure it gets checked, and then hop onto your mixed practice, and that is that. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and looking forward to doing some more math next week. Bye.